Welcome to the award-winning Ed Brown Show. I am your host, Kamaria Richmond, and as most of you know, Mr. Brown passed in September, and it is my duty and obligation, but also a privilege. I'm thankful and grateful to step into his shoes to become the host on Mr. Brown's show. We're going to keep it lively as he did, bring you lots of great guests. I worked with Mr. Brown for about 4.5 years. I was a volunteer on the show, and I was like, Mr. Brown, you know what? If you need help, I'm your girl. I'll help you out. And so he said, okay, I'll see you next Wednesday. And that happened for the next 4.5 years. So he is someone that I loved very much. I consider him a friend, but also a mentor. And we're going to keep the show rolling, and I hope to do him proud. I am thankful and grateful for the opportunity. And with that, we have our first guest, Mrs. Paulette Gaines-Wood. Thank you for being the first guest, Paulette, on the show.
Thank you so very much for having me.
Yes, and we had mentioned before we're going to get through this together. But you have such an interesting story. So we're going to be talking about the noble Anthony and his lady Cleopatra. You are an award-winning author, and this is an award-winning book. So tell us about the noble Anthony and his lady Cleopatra.
Well, the two main characters of the book are an 250-pound English Mastiff, the noble Anthony, and his beautiful bride. They are a married couple. The lady Cleopatra is an Abyssinian cat, and they live with a family here in Bowie.
Interesting, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Now, tell us, your book has a beautiful cover with Anthony, like you said, he's really big, and this little tiny Cleopatra, the cat on top of his head. How did you come up with that concept and that visual image?
Well, I wanted my characters to stand out. All right, and if there's one thing a 250-pound Mastiff does, it's stand out in a crowd.
Right.
And so I wanted a large breed dog. And the fact that, you know, Cleopatra's favorite mode of transportation when they're outside of the family home is on her head, it had to be a dog with a large head. Right. And I thought about Great Danes, beautiful big dogs, head's not that big.
Right.
St. Bernards, yeah, possibility. And then as I looked at pictures of Mastiffs, both the Bull Mastiff and the English Mastiff, it's like, oh yeah, that's my guy. That's my guy. And also for me, it's an ancient, for Mastiffs, they're an ancient breed. And many other of today's breeds, like Boxers, Rottweilers, St. Bernards, Great Danes, are all based on the Mastiff lineage, just as Abyssinians are a very old cat breed. And when you see the pictures in the pyramids and on the walls, the cats that they show there look very, very much like today's Abyssinians.
Right, and I just love that image. Now, who designed the image? You had the vision, but tell us about the person that brought your concept to life.
Yes, I was blessed with an absolutely wonderful illustrator. Her name is Beck Hastings. She grew up right here in Bowie, graduated from Bowie High School. She came to me as a sewing student. She was very much involved with cosplay, and she wanted to learn how to sew to be able to make her costumes, which she does absolutely amazing work in the design and construction. I mean, she makes armor you know,
Wow.
so very serious here. But in our sewing sessions, I started telling her the stories, because it's one thing that authors do. It's, you know, bother our friends and family, bore them with our stories. And so she really got to know and really loved the characters. And so when I finally decided that yes, I'm really going to start writing this book, she's the first and only person I thought of being the illustrator and doing my artwork. And in all honesty, when she showed me the first black and white sketch of Anthony and Cleopatra, I almost cried, because it was really just a special moment to almost come to life with this vision that I had had in my head for so many years.
Well, she did a beautiful job. Now, tell us this, you are an award-winning author, and this is an award-winning book. And you waited a little bit later to start writing. Well, not to start writing, but to start working on your book.
Yeah, well, there were a few false starts along the way. I am dyslexic. The writing part is rather challenging. I'm also not a very good typist. So put the two together, yeah, you got a real mess here. But you know, there was just life in between, and then J.K. Rowling and the Harry Potter books. They were just so over-the-top successful, and there were so many of them. I thought, well, you know, after this craziness and movies and merchandise, nobody is going to be interested in reading my little stories about the weird cat that lives in a small city in Maryland. And so that kind of put things on the back burner for a while. But then I had a major birthday. I turned 70.
Wow.
Don't quite know how that happened to me, but it did.
But it did.
And it was truly now or never, you know, because first of all, if the books were to have some type of, you know, really good success, I wanted to be around to enjoy that success, as opposed to the second wife getting that. So it's like, okay, we got to do this now.
This is it.
Yes, good, bad, or indifferent, we're going to get out here and do it now. And of course, today we have self-publishing, which is something you didn't have 20 or 30 years ago. And so I did not have to wait on a publisher to discover me. And matter of fact, these days, you can wait 6 months or more just to get a rejection letter. And once again, I didn't have that kind of time, right? So I self-published through Amazon, and it was, trust me, very exciting. They send you, the author, a proof copy of your book before it goes live on Amazon. So opening that box and, you know, pulling out that book that had my name on it and Beck's name right under mine, and the beautiful color artwork. Yeah, that was quite a moment.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
You know, most of us loved just looking and learning, I know I do, about Egypt. Everything ancient Egypt, I want to know. So tell us, what was it about Egypt? And you said, okay, I'm going to have this, and I'm going to have some characters, bring it back to life. Its glory.
Just a kind of a, well, always been a fan of Cleopatra movies.
Yes.
All right, so I guess a little Hollywood influence there. I've always had pets, dogs and cats, had neighbors and friends that had dogs and cats. And the Egyptians worshipped cats. So right there we have a little mystical thing happen. They have the god Beset, who has the face of a cat and the body of a human woman. And so that kind of, you know, just seemed to bring things together. Matter of fact, Cleopatra refers to it as the time when humans were wiser and worshiped cats as they should.
She's probably right.
So that kind of gave me my setting. And truthfully, as the story started in my head some time ago, over the years, you know, more parts were added, some things were deleted, and it just kind of grew. Matter of fact, I really told my husband, I said, you know, if I had written these stories 20 years ago, I don't think they would be as good as they are now, because they really kind of came to life for me now. All the little edges, little parts came together. This was just the time to do it.
And I was looking at your bio, and you're like, it's 70, and it's now or never. I have to get it done.
Yeah, now it's actually 72 an hour.
And we were going to talk about your second book as well, but you are a great storyteller, and you love animals. Have you always written about animals?
I've written about some other subjects, but I must say that my favorites have been the ones about animals. You know, they tell authors all the time, write about what you know.
Right.
And this is what I know. Most of the animals in the books are either my own pets or pets of friends and neighbors. Like there's one character they meet when they go to Bowie Fest, a big 22-pound calico named Buddha Callie. All right, and my husband and I had a 22-pound calico named Buddha Callie. And like the character in the book, she was a cat burglar. All right, she started out stealing socks out of the drawer. All right, one time she stole my wedding ring. She stole the car keys. All right, so in the book, I could expand on that a little bit and have her, you know, begin with her family to steal these smaller items. But then in the book, I could have it go on to, all right, she brought home a riding lawnmower or a 5-set piece of lawn furniture.
She was busy.
And of course, the whole family remembers that Sunday morning when they awoke and found the small child sitting at the foot of the bed. But yes, this was all based on our own dearly beloved Buddha Callie.
I love that name. I love that name. And you mentioned something about mystical. Cleopatra has some kind of mystic magic of her own.
Part of her gift from Beset was a little bit of magic. Not really over the top, but it's like the whole community knows that sometimes weird things happen when Cleopatra is around. And there is usually, since she has beautiful emerald green eyes, there's usually a little flash of green that you see when her magic happens. Now, it doesn't always work. All right, if she's using it, you know, in a sense, and she's using it for evil instead of good, yes, the magic is inclined to work for her. But when she's doing it for a good reason, to help someone, to save someone, then yes, these little things will happen when she's around. But you know, in her community that she lives in, everyone kind of knows that these weird little things happen, and the community really accepts this. Matter of fact, one morning, they always escort the neighborhood children to the bus stop. And so as they're doing this, they get to a large intersection, and the kids all stop and wait. Anthony and Cleopatra go out and sit in the middle of the street, and you know, the bus approaches and they give the signal to when the children should cross the street. And so this one particular morning, this car comes screeching around the corner, going way too fast, right, you know, up to the children. And Cleopatra turns and looks. We see this blinding flash of green. The car comes to a screeching halt, almost stands upright. Tires are burning, and the back end slams back down. And the young woman who's driving the car just suddenly has this massive headache from this green shot, and said, "Oh, my lady, I'm so sorry. You're right. I was going way too fast. I wasn't paying attention. Please, I'm sorry. It'll never happen again." And so she sits there and recovers. The children finish crossing the street, get on the school bus. Bus takes them. Anthony and Cleopatra come back. "Thank you so much, my lady. Have a great day." And he goes, Anthony and Cleopatra can communicate with all children, and all children can communicate with them.
Interesting.
All right.
Interesting.
Special adults, like the mother of the family, all right, can also communicate with them a little bit.
Okay. Okay. And which I kind of love that part of the story. So Cleopatra is she's just fabulous.
Yes.
She's just fabulous with her own wardrobe.
Oh, yes.
And Anthony is just kind of like, okay, she's in charge.
You know, they are very, like, Anthony loves children. Anthony loves humans. Cleopatra loves Anthony. Okay. So she will do anything for her beloved. Matter of fact, that's the way they refer to each other most of the time. He calls her my lady, my lovely. She refers to him, my beloved Anthony. So they are very committed to each other. And like I said, she would bring down a city to save Anthony.
Oh, I love that. Now, they are married and living in Bowie.
Yes.
Why is that so important?
Well, first of all you have to do is look at the pictures on the internet, and you'll see many dogs and cats that have very close, loving relationships with each other. So to me, you know, love is love.
Absolutely.
And the fact that they're different species, so what? And the reason I chose to set the story in Bowie is that my husband and I have lived here for over 30 years. We have always had good friends and neighbors here. We've always found it to be a very welcoming and accepting community.
Okay.
And so, yes, I wanted a town with a good sense of community. When a child is in danger at Fox Hill Pond, yes, the whole community comes and is with the family and brings them hot chocolate or blanket or whatever, because this is the way people in Bowie behave. You know, when a family's home is broken into, and as the police take the bad guys away, they realize there are these other people in their home, and it's like, well, sweeping up the glass off the floor, and somebody is giving them, you know, well, I run a reupholstery business, you know, bring your couch over, I can give you it got damaged, and I can give you a good discount here. And these are things I've seen in our life in Bowie. That's why I never thought about setting the story anyplace else.
That is wonderful, that sense of community.
Yes.
Now, as an author, how do you write? Like, what is the process? You know, for a lot of authors, oh, maybe meditation, or, you know, a nice dark closet someplace, or lots of tea and, you know, lots of music. So how do you write?
I'm very fortunate that in our home I have my own little office space where I can go and close the door. And matter of fact, my husband knows that if that office door is closed, yes, he must knock, and he might not be let in. But for me, I don't have any music or anything like that. Matter of fact, with the dyslexia, I actually tried a voice-activated typing program. But I found that the sound of my own voice and telling the story like that way was actually distracting to me. So I need complete silence and to simply listen to the voices in my head that tell me the story.
That is so interesting. And when you talk about Anthony and Cleopatra, I see it visually in my head, even without looking at the book. I just see them visually, and I see them in ancient Egypt, and she's just strutting down, just strutting down the pathway.
And in the second book, The Noble Anthony and his Lady Cleopatra Return Home, you actually get to see them in ancient Egypt. Auntie Imogene, who creates Cleopatra's wardrobe, wants to be remembered.
Okay.
And so she doesn't have a family, she doesn't have children, and when she's gone, she wants somebody to remember her. And so she decides to take the boys on an adventure. Matter of fact, first, as she puts it, back to her home. And the boys say, back to your house, but they've been with, they're thinking her home here in Bowie. Right. And he's, no, we're going to Egypt. And so that, of course, they have quite, an adventure there, but they actually meet their ancient Egyptian selves. And the four of them have to work together to rescue the boys and bring them back safely.
Well, we're looking forward to that. Now, do you think, so you have a second book, do you think you will continue with Cleopatra and Anthony?
For the time being, I think so. They have a pretty nice following, and it seems I'm very fortunate that as soon as I finish one book, people immediately start asking about, well, when's the next one? So truthfully, after the new year, I will begin work on the third book.
Wow.
The working title, I don't know if this is the way it's going to end up, but the working title is, of course, The Noble Anthony and his Lady Cleopatra Tell Tea Party Stories. It's in the first book, there's a section where they begin to go and attend tea parties with one of the little neighborhood girls. There's a wonderful illustration of Anthony in his big floppy flowered hat and pearl necklace and feathered boa for, typical tea party wardrobe, which we all must wear. And so I thought that would be a good way to have them, but also maybe introduce some other characters and other stories that I've had over the years, and have them tell these stories while they're with the little girls at the tea party. So we're going to probably hear about Aries the green-legged dog, and Sniffer, who's in the first two books, he's a bloodhound. But Sniffer and his cat, the great Alexander, have some very interesting adventures of their own.
Now, are we just looking at the cats and the dogs? Do we have other animals coming into play in the next like book number 3?
Well, I think it probably is going to be you know, a combination. There will be a lot of cats and dogs because that is what I know.
Right.
There's one character, definitely not a cat or dog, that we see briefly in Bowie Fest that might be expanded a little bit more. That is Andy Anaconda. And you know how everyone is, you know, brings pets and everything to Bowie Fest. And so in this particular year's at Bowie Fest, Andy Anaconda has come in this gigantic plexiglass tank filled with water. Seemed at past visits he was more loose. But then we had that unfortunate disappearance of Guinea and Pig. So now his family has tried to contain him.
I love that.
So.
I love that. And we'll talk about this a little bit later too, about the whole importance of you know, the characters coming back to life, reincarnation, which is really, really interesting. Now, do we see the same family just growing older, or are we seeing a different family? Well, I guess each time they're reincarnated, it's a different family.
Yes, well, as they have literally traveled through time. All right, they were with Lincoln at the time of the Civil War. All right, they have been and can be in many places with many families. Sometimes they're with rich and powerful people, and sometimes they've been with very poor, regular, I guess what you think of as, you know, regular people. So it's always the same pattern. They come to a family, always a family that has children. They live with that family and help to raise the children, as all pets do.
Right.
And then as the children grow up and go off into their lives, all right, they die as pets do. All right, they are mourned and celebrated as we do our pets. But then they reappear at a different time and a different place with a new family.
And so the cycle just continues. And how can people find out more about you and more about the book?
Well, both books are available on Amazon. Just put in, matter of fact, even if you just put in Anthony and Cleopatra, they will show up. You can put in the book titles. You can also put in my name. They have their own Facebook page, The Noble Anthony and His Lady Cleopatra. And I have my own page, my author's page, PauletteGainswood.com. And it's been a really fun and exciting time. When I was younger, I always said and told my friends that I felt if any fame was to be in my life, that I actually would prefer for it to come later in life because I would appreciate it more.
Right. Well, I
was right.
You were right. So, Paulette, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. Make sure, we want everyone to have both copies of the book, and we're also going to talk about the second book. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for helping with my first show.